my whole story is that a lot of my experiences translate to I can help others through those experiences. And I think that's what experiences and hard things can do for us when we look outward, right? Like, yes, we learn something through the experience, but really, like, we can turn outward and help more people with that and coping with that experience and be a positive outlook for that, or just relate and connect a lot.
In our podcast, Hearing the Unheard, Stories of Transformation, we discuss a variety of sensitive subjects such as suicide, suicidal ideation, self-harm, abuse, and faith crisis. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to our podcast, Hearing the Unheard, Stories of Transformation, presented by Pause Wellness. I'm your host, Eric Stauffer. I'm very pleased to introduce to you our guest today, Elder Logan Castleton. Hi, Elder. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Our listeners may have seen some of your work already. You're also known as the Rapping Missionary, correct?
Yeah, that's what I do.
That's great. We're going to get into that and what that means and how you've come to be the Rapping Missionary. But first, let's just start with your background. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing and school and hobbies, that kind of thing.
Yeah, of course. So I started... Well, it's always tricky to see where I start my story because it kind of comes full circle every 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
But I guess I'll start with, I was born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which essentially means half of a heart. They didn't think I'd make it out alive, but I did. And I had 3 open heart surgeries and a few more down the line, a lot more. And because of that, I was born in Indianapolis, and I moved around a bit throughout the East Coast and kind of West Coast too, and then stayed in Colorado for a lot, and then moved to Utah. But throughout that, when I was Indiana, Colorado growing up, I had because of those surgeries, I couldn't do, and because of my heart condition, I couldn't do sports or run around or hang out with the other kids at recess, or I'd stay inside. And it was super hard because here's all my friends doing the things a lot of people do, here in America, just whatever, sports and schooling and hanging out. And I was just inside, not doing too much. And that's why I was drawn to music. My mom, she got a keyboard for Christmas so she could relearn how to play. And I kind of stole it from her. And I started learning how to play the piano. And because of that, I just grew this love for music. And it's kind of accelerated up to this point, I guess. So that's what I did. Like when my friends were outside playing, I'd stay inside. They even got me like a piano teacher, I think, just because I was inside and during recess, and they probably felt bad, so they got me a piano teacher. So I practiced piano, and that's what I did. So I started piano, and I have a few siblings, but other than that, just grew up. My parents separated about 8 years ago, and then we moved here to Utah. And I guess up to that point, when I was in 5th grade, I got in contact with other organizations, nonprofit, like American Heart Association, Indiana chapter, Make-A-Wish Foundation, Colorado chapter, Serious Fun Children's Network with their Roundup River Ranch chapter. And so what I did, just as a 5th grader, 6th grader, I flew out to New York and London and LA and public spoke in front of crowds and performed the piano. And that's what I did. And then in middle school, while my other friends were hanging out, I'd just go and speak at events in Denver, and probably about 30 to 40 events, just going and traveling and speaking and playing the piano. And that's what I did.
Wow.
And very unique.
So you've had a lot of exposure to audiences and public speaking and presentations and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So let me go back just a little bit. So you said because of this, you were born in Indianapolis or Indiana.
Not because of that.
Not because of, I was wondering, did your parents see that you had this condition through ultrasound, or was it just discovered when you were born?
That's a good question. So they knew about it prior, and the doctor said I wouldn't be born. So.
Oh, so they anticipated that you wouldn't be born alive.
Yeah.
Wow.
And if I were to not come out breathing.
Wow. So then, did they move to locations that might be more beneficial to your health circumstance, or was it just based upon their professions?
Sometimes, and then both. So both, really. We just moved around a lot. I'm not even sure why, but we did. So
Wow. And where do you fit in order of birth of your siblings?
I'm the oldest.
So you're the oldest of how many?
I have 3 younger siblings, and I won't disclose too much about it.
That's great. So you're the oldest of 3. And then your parents separated 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Did you come with your mom or your dad, or did they both come to Utah?
Yeah, just my mom. My
Just your
dad's
mom.
still in Colorado.
Okay. So because of your condition, you went through a lot of alone time.
Yeah.
And I know, having children of my own, going through high school and junior high and elementary school, how much a sense of belonging and having friends and being involved with your peers can be such a difficult thing.
Mm-hmm.
So can you describe that side of it, that having to be in during recess and not being able to be involved in some of the activities that your peers were in?
Yeah, that's a wonderful perspective, because looking back to, I was always known as a person with a heart disease, right? So a lot of my acquaintances, school friends or whatever, would know me as that, oh, he's the heart guy, he's the music guy, the piano guy, right? Not a lot of people knew me, right? And I spent a lot of my times with adults, interacting with adults at events and things, and I was very comfortable interacting with adults, and they were my friends. And I think that translated later when I got to high school. I remember freshman, sophomore year, still performing and stuff, but I remember I went to, whenever at school, at lunchtime, I just sit down. I had one tree. I tell a story of a tree. I had a tree I sat by, and I sat there for 2 years just by myself. I just call my mom and hang out. And it was very interesting, that more isolation. It wasn't that it was bad. I was bad, they were bad. It was just and not too much connection.
So did you feel confidence in your alone time, or did you feel sadness and loneliness in a negative way? Or was it both?
I think confidence grew over time. I still to this day don't like being alone. I've dealt with it though, because of further circumstances, but yeah, no, it's not fun. And I think that's when I started building my relationship more with God, because I realized He is a friend to me, that I didn't have to do whatever. And it was hard too when people attached piano to me, or a heart, and didn't know me too much, right? And I think that kind of helped me realize my more truer friends, right? I've only had and it's interesting now with social media, right? Let's say a lot of people will recognize me from Instagram or something, but I only have 3 to 4 or 5 good friends, that I spend time with and I appreciate. So
that's amazing. So if you, I even noticed that, just so our listeners understand, you were a student of mine, and I teach a religion class that's known as seminary, and and you were a student in that class, and I immediately noticed that exact thing, that it was easy for you to talk to me. You weren't like the other peers that were oh, they had to be, cool, so I can't talk to the teacher, but you were really down to earth. It was just easy to talk to you.
Yeah.
And you attribute that to this experience that you had connecting with adults.
Yeah. And that's why I've really loved my leaders, and I've connected with them really well, because I just turn in that, because I'm used to that adult. And not to say that to excuse myself now not interacting with everyone. I actually love, one of my favorite people to interact with are high schoolers now, because I think being freshman, sophomore, not having friends, and then junior year, whenever you saw me, right, that 6 months didn't have friends, and I had 2 good friends after that I really loved and hung out with a lot. And so I feel like I not relate to a lot of them, but I can understand, if you're feeling sitting alone at lunch or whatever, classic scenario or whatnot, but it really is true. It is hard, because you're just there on your phone, whatever,
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
So, and I love how you've kind of phrased this, where it's they knew me as the heart kid or the music kid. And then here I am. I introduce you on this podcast as the Rapping Missionary, right? So you've got all these titles that people are knowing you for, and yet you say, but they don't know me. They don't know Logan Castleton. So describe what that's been like is that difficult? And if so, why is that difficult when they don't see you?
Yeah, that's great. I think what's interesting is, because I was known as the heart kid for a while, when I went to high school, I shifted high school. I went to one freshman, sophomore year, and then the other here in Utah, junior, senior year. And I kept that part hidden a lot. I didn't tell tons of people.
I never knew.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that you had that condition. So,
Yeah. And then when I went to college, BYU Provo, I kept it hidden too. And because I wanted them to like me for me, right, and things, and not just because of music or my heart or whatever. Or if they'd like me just because they felt bad because I had a condition or whatever. And it really started when I performed again during college, and kind of made me thinking like, this story it's just inspiring. It's something God needs me to share, because I tried keeping it hidden. It was open, and then I tried keeping it hidden, and then now with Oxygen, I feel like God's like, okay, tell everyone.
Yeah.
There's no hiding it now.
You can't hide it now. Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, I think this plays into the mental health aspect too, of where do you find your confidence in, right? Like, what label do you want to be not known by, but like, what label do you deem yourself, right? Because if I deem myself as a heart kid or whatever, then I don't know, I don't know, it's just different, right? Or Rapping Missionary, then if anything Rapping Missionary does is bad, then I attribute that time bad or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I guess that's not the best example, but just those labels, right?
Yeah.
Where I got to label myself as, no, God loves me, right? That's my label. And even if no one talks to me,
Yeah.
like even if I have no friends, God will always be my friend. So that's where that comes in.
I love that. That seems very relevant to our time too. One thing the leader of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has really emphasized is to know yourself, or your identity to be known as a child of God first and foremost, rather than by some other part of us or title that we adopt. Can I ask you what that means to you? To identify yourself and to be seen as a child of God, not just a part of you.
Yeah, I think it comes to if I know I can be loved by God, that's it. That's all. That's why I came here. Like, if God loves me, it really is enough. And I don't need to seek that, I guess,
validation.
I don't know. That's the basis, right? I can always be happy because God loves me, right? Or I can always have a positive outlook, I'll say, right? I'm not happy all the time, but
right.
And I think that's the hard part too, especially with social media a lot. I felt like I look happy always, or I do this always, right? And no one's, well, I don't know, no one, I can't speak for that, but at least I'm not happy all the time, right? But I am a lot more happy than I was in high school, because through that experience, I learned like, yeah, I am a child of God, right? Like, that's who got me through that time. And now, like, that tree or whatever freshman year, like that's like a sacred, not sacred, but just like
thing.
Special spot for me, because my whole story is that a lot of my experiences translate to, I can help others through those experiences. And I think that's what experiences and hard things can do for us when we look outward, right? Like, yes, we learn something through the experience, but really, like, we can turn outward and help more people with that, coping with that experience, and be a positive outlook for that, or just relate and connect a lot.
Yeah. On one hand, you have, I want to be seen as, for me, not just a part of me. But then on the other hand, you also have these subtitles that have probably benefited you in some way. Has there been a part of you that has appreciated being seen as the heart kid or the music kid or the rapping missionary? And if so, why?
Oh, of course. I guess what I'm saying here is all those labels are great, right? But I just prioritized God as first, right? Or God loves me as the first. But no, those titles, right? A heart person, a music person, piano, whatever, or rapping missionary, like, that's how I lead into my mission, right? Rapping missionary. I have cards I give out that say rapping missionary, right? And more, it's kind of a mental struggle for me not to prioritize that, right? Because that's where the struggle comes in.
Yeah.
Not prioritizing that, but definitely, I don't know, it's like that balance, because I need to have it, because that's my mission.
Yeah.
Too. Or I guess mission, just saying, like, that's how I bring others to Christ, or just help them out in some way.
So it's almost like you've taken these unique titles or circumstances, and you've learned to leverage them to help people see who they are, or how God sees us as individuals. One
of my things that drives me, especially for music, is one thing that helped me a lot. Well, music helps me in general. Like, it's something God's given me to help cope through. This is one of the main things I use to cope with my health is music. That's something I can do. I'm not told not to do that or how to do it or whatnot, but I remember just freshman, sophomore year when I'm driving in the car, carpooling back from school or whatever, I just have a playlist for going home or have a playlist for this or that. And I loved the music. And me, especially a lot of the rap pop music goes out to high schoolers, the majority. I hope to help them during a hard time, right? Like have that connection, that spirit, right, of just uplifting music.
So the genre of music that you're using, you're using it to specifically target that demographic. You're looking to help that kind of high school age, young adult audience. I
guess I want to impact everyone.
Yeah.
I like the pop rap, so I write it, but I tend to find that it impacts them a lot.
They can connect with it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's fascinating. So let's talk about the heart condition for a minute, and just tell me, as you've learned about your condition, tell us about the life outlook of what that is. I mean, you obviously were a miracle just from birth, but what does that look like for the rest of life?
Yeah, so ever since like 12 years old, 13 years old, so I will need a new heart and most likely a new liver, so double transplant when that comes. The interesting part about it is I don't know when, and I've never known when, because the doctors thought I'd need a new heart at age 13. So ever since like 12, 13, I've been like, this could be my last year before a new heart. This could be my last year before, whatever. But the mental health aspect comes in. I couldn't think like that because it could come whenever, right? Like if I would have just prepared that whole year and then just waited for it to happen, I wouldn't have continued my life, right? Like it's been probably, I don't know, I'm 20, so like 7 years since 13 years old. And it just hit, like just 6 months ago, it just started turning for the worse again. It's always been bad, but it's been relatively stable. And so essentially it'll look like new heart, new liver, life outlook, just like it'll take me out for a good year. Just not being able to do a lot, not feeling normal. And, just medications constantly, watching what I eat constantly, etc. Just taking care of myself extra for the rest of my life. But
that's fascinating because you essentially, because there's this so much unknown about your condition, right? That you could have sat there and said, well, I'll just wait around. I need to wait until this happens. I can't progress in my life. And then you'd be waiting around for a really long time without developing and being involved, and which contributes to you having a more healthy approach to your life, mentally and emotionally, by being engaged. That's amazing.
You really can't like one of the things that was hard for me more recently is that just with this all accelerating and more procedures coming in the future and whatnot, and I don't know what next month's even going to look like, right? It's more anxiety inducing of like, oh my gosh, like where am I going to be in a year from now, right? Whatever. Like missionaries generally serve 2 years for men, and I'm at a year-ish, which means that I don't know what'll be like in a year, right? I could be in a hospital in a year. I could be in college in a year. I really don't know. And they said it could be, well, you could wait for a new heart till up to like 5 years. We have people waiting. Or you could be hospitalized for a year and have it, and whatever. There's so many options, right? But the problem is when you do that, then you get out of the present moment, right? A lot of anxiety is like what you can't control. I can control my health to an extent, but I can't control if my heart's failing or
the
not.
outcome,
and I never could. And that's the amazing part where I see God's hand in it. A lot of people may see me, oh, you have oxygen. How is God being good to you? But remember, without oxygen, a lot of men or elders, we call them, with that authority to preach, just goes out, and it's called proselyting. They knock doors and teach lessons and etc. So I'd be doing that if my health was stable, right? I wouldn't be here making music and making this impact that's far more than I could have in whatever place preaching the gospel. And it hit right when I was going to go proselyting. It hit right then, not any other time, right? And all these previous experiences, I think when you're nervous about the future, at least for me, from a faith-based standpoint, we're looking at what God has done for you, right? And then remembering, okay, He will make everything okay. It's probably going to be super painful for me, right? Like it's not fun. But I can't control it. And
Wow.
living in that present moment's, trusting in God's the perfect form of mindfulness.
Have you had some, I mean, you've mentioned it. You've said, I haven't always been that smiling missionary. I have these down times. Can you take us to some of that a little bit and share with us what it's like? I mean, maybe through high school or some of those lonely moments, like tell us how you felt and how bad is it sometimes?
Yeah, no, that's a great question.
I don't mean to sound pessimistic, but it helps us with the contrast, right?
No, this is good. Because I think my whole life I've always been smiling, right? Yeah, I guess just, it's a lot of, sorry, my throat.
You're good.
Yeah, just a lot of like super extreme stuff, right? Like I could die tomorrow. We all can think that way, right? But especially me, or like, I don't know if I'm going to make it through the surgery, or I don't know if I can have a normal, quote, normal, like whatever life looks like after this school experience or family experience or whatever. I don't know if I could provide in the future to my kids. I might be bedridden for 5 years of my life. I don't know. Or a lot of these things, right? It's just spiraling in a what's going to happen or woe is me or whatnot. And I don't know, like it's just tricky with something I can't control. And yeah, it's just a lot of thoughts like that. Like,
as we have listeners who hear your story and maybe they are associated with someone with a health challenge like that, as you've had those moments of sadness or concern or anxiety about the future, in your support group, in your family or your friends, what have you found has been really helpful for you and what isn't helpful? Let's start with what has been helpful as a support person for you.
I think if you have a support person, definitely that's amazing, because I just love spending time with my family, right, and friends, and yeah, a support group, right? Like what gets me through a lot of the hospital stays is just when I have like a parent with me, or if I have like my aunt with me or whatever, and I just spend time with them, right? And it's really nice to see them. I also love getting, well, I don't know, it's just me. I like getting notes, just like, hey, you're doing great or whatever. But really, like those little things, like go write notes to the people in the hospital or whatever. Like it really does help, because you're just there in bed. At least when I'm hospitalized, right? If you're in that situation, just there in bed and it's lonely, no one's really visiting. So visits always make the day better, or just texting, really just not being alone. Like that's what's helped me a lot. And then I feel like it comes to a point to where your family can support you. And if that's what helped, that's great. For me too, it has to come to a point where I have to accept whatever comes, because they can be there, but they can't adjust my future, right? So then I have to come to a point with myself, be like, not even address the possibilities, but just be like, am I okay to let whatever happen? Like, do I really believe in a God, or whatever you believe in, right? Do I really value this, or do I really value that? Or then it comes to that, and I've accepted, it's a process for me, right? Like it seems one procedure's okay, and then the next is a little worse, and the next a little worse, but I'm adapting, right? And I definitely feel the Savior with me through procedure, or just hard nights, right? You may not feel it in the moment too, but just going to bed, just go to bed. If you're sitting, having a hard time at night, just go to bed and then wake up and then address it or whatever, right? So
start the day fresh. So let me ask you, if someone were to write you a note, you're in the hospital and they're going to write you a note to show you love and support. Are there things that are said in those notes that are more helpful than others?
I don't know. Not too much for me. It's just
for you.
Fun.
It's just the general idea of them thinking of you.
Yeah, because a lot of them will be like, "Oh, I remember when I was in the hospital once." Whatever. Then, especially if you know the people, you're like, "Oh, that's crazy." Or like if they write a joke, you're like, "Oh, that person always gives jokes." Or, it's really just visiting in a different form. Notes are so.
That's great. Well, I think let's go to the mission experience next, and what that has. You've had a very unique, unorthodox mission that we rarely get to see. I mean, I don't know anyone who's not only been given the opportunity, but that it's been so supported in the way that you've been able to do your mission. It's so unique. So let's walk through that, and then I want to come back to that you've had to stare life and death in the face in so many ways. We'll come back to that, but let's talk about, first of all, did you feel like you would always be able to serve a mission? Was that ever in question? And if so, let's start with that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I've always wanted to serve a mission. For those listening who don't know, it's just like a 2-year stance where you just share the gospel, right? Sometimes you go somewhere, oftentimes you go somewhere, majority of the time, right? And I knew about, there's kind of 2 types of missions: proselyting, where you go out and teach and things, and then service, which is a relatively new thing that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is doing. That kind of started 5 to 6 years ago, where you live at home and you serve within the community. So I knew those 2 options were available, and I asked my church leader, hey, which one, my bishop, which one you submit an application to start the process of becoming a missionary, and said, which one should we go for, service or proselyting? And they said, well, let's just try proselyting. So I was like, okay. So I did that, and my health was relative.
Can I ask, just sorry to interrupt, did you see them as different in value, service versus proselyting, or did it not matter to you?
What's interesting, because I'll kind of turn to that in a second. No, because that's a great question.
I'm jumping to spoilers already, so.
No, this is good.
Keep going, yeah.
For me, I was just like, wherever I serve, right? Wherever I go. Mm-hmm. Just want to serve. And then I got to... And then I was in a community like at BOU Provo Congregation Ward that a lot of people received their mission calls, and it was wonderful. And I got to experience that proselyting side more of where you're going to go, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And I started to develop a thing where I was like, well, I may not be going, far. I don't know what my call is going to look like. So I just said, wherever, it doesn't matter, right? Wherever I go, it's fine. Because it really is, because God calls you wherever, right? For that reason. So I said wherever. Then when I got proselyting, it was incredible. I was going to speak Spanish and go to Chicago and everything, and I was so excited. Just full circle moments for me. And then when I got to Chicago and everything, my health took a turn for the worse, where I was sick in bed like for 3 days. But the interesting part is, like, those 3 days in Chicago when I was healthy was the most full days what people typically have in a proselyting experience, like the most full you could have. And so when I got home, this was where it was interesting for me culturally wise too, because you have something where I said I'd go wherever, but I thought the work was a certain way. So I didn't care if I was, I'm not from Utah, but I've been living here for a few years. I didn't care if I was going to be in Utah or across the country or stateside or just in the States, right? Or wherever. I didn't care, but I thought the work went on, like you went out and shared the gospel and knocked on doors and whatever. Like, that's how I thought. That's how I've been taught and everything too. And like, it was that until recently. So then I had to come to terms, which is interesting seeing where I am at now. I'd probably scold myself a lot, but coming to terms culturally with, am I serving a mission, blah, blah, blah. And for a lot of people who aren't of our faith are probably like, well, yeah, you still have you're just serving, right?
Yeah.
But especially within our community, at least culturally, some people, including me, didn't deem it as a real mission or whatnot. You do the same thing, right? Like, you put pause on regular life or whatever and serve, and 24/7. Same with service missionaries. They're not part-time. They always wear the tag, and they're encouraged to do so. So then I came to terms with that, and what really helped me through that moment was when I had this impression essentially where God was like, hey, there's no small things, right? There's no small things to me, wherever you are. And in my mind, I was like, this is a small thing compared to proselyting or whatever. And then it was interesting. I got sick, and more sick, and I hadn't fully recovered from Chicago. So I went out in July of 2023, and then September I got more sick, and then October, November, and then I was in bed for probably like a month-ish, just hanging out and just sick. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here serving God? I feel like I'm not, because I'm just sitting down all day.
Was this at home?
Mm-hmm.
Or okay. So let's backtrack just a minute, because I want our listeners to understand when a young person is planning on going on a mission, the normal. See, there I go using a word that would be culturally not accurate, right? But but it's usually anticipated that a proselyting mission is quote unquote the normal mission.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this new aspect, like you mentioned, this service mission.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were saying that you were a part of that culture, you're saying that you saw service missionaries as not a full or not complete.
Yeah, not a real mission.
Not a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
See, I think it's really important that we capture that, because in this podcast, that's one of the things we try to do is get rid of stigmas, right?
Exactly.
And if there's a stigma attached to service missionaries, then what is that saying to all service missionaries, right? And what is it saying about the work that we're doing? And is one more valuable than the other? And you're saying that you've experienced that, because you got, again, to our listeners who may not understand, you probably had to disclose all of your medical circumstances when you submitted your application for a mission. So you anticipated that you probably wouldn't get a proselyting mission. Is that correct? Or did you think it was a possibility?
I don't know. I had that both. Like, that's what's interesting. I didn't really care at first. Then when I went proselyting, it's like, I think I thought they were real missionaries, but I just looked down on them, right? Like, oh, you're less than because you couldn't do this. And I'll address why that's thinking error, like we were talking about earlier, right? And that'll come in just a second. Yeah. That's okay. Because
you're doing great.
December, when I got really sick and had that moment, there's no small things to God, whatever. Because to me, I was like, I look down on service missionaries, they're doing small things, which isn't true, but that's how I viewed it from a cultural standpoint. December, I had a heart surgery, got on oxygen. I was like, then I started freaking out. Oh my gosh, is my heart going to come soon? What am I going to do? I feel like as service missionaries, you serve in the local community, and I had places where I was already serving, and I had to get rid of a lot of those places and stop serving there because of my health conditions, and I couldn't do it. But I held on to, essentially, I wanted to do music for a big part of it, and I had done it before when I was home too. And I think people listening to, like, even that stigma of living at home too and not being in Utah serving a proselyting, right? That's also a stigma. So January hit, and I had an impression. It was a low point right there, December. I felt like everything was just crashing down. And I think a lot with my story, a lot of these weaknesses come forward as these strengths and really positive things into my story. Like, and this is where the heart's going to come in, and my music. Because I didn't have a lot of friends, I spent a lot of time doing music, or because of my heart, I did a lot of music. Because of my heart, I was sent as a service missionary, not a proselyting. And all these things kind of culminated to January, where I had a thought or an impression from God to say, you should begin rapping. And let me just address this for especially maybe listeners who don't know. That's not a thing like missionaries do. Like, like that's not, like, it's maybe
not an option.
Yeah. Like, maybe you'll have fun on a random day in your mission and write a rap and record it or something, but it's not like your mission is writing rap and putting it on Spotify and TikTok and Instagram, whatever. Like, that's not a thing. Like, you either go proselyte or you serve in your community, like you work at thrift shops or you serve in humanitarian centers or whatnot, right? There's no option for
food kitchens, whatever.
Right? So it was really unique, and I pushed it off. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. Like, Heavenly Father, I feel like that's me thinking that because I like it, but I don't. And I've done rap prior in high school and things. Essentially, I had that impression again and again. And after that third time, I was like, okay, or however much, I was like, I'm going to ask my missionary leaders or the people who direct the missionary work in my area. Service proselyting, they both have missionary leaders. You may have heard of mission president for proselyting. And service missionary leaders are over an area of service missionaries. It's a little more different now because they're integrated, which means my mission president is the Utah Ogden mission president, and I can go proselyting, but we'll go into that in a second. And let me know on time too.
You're doing great. Okay. You're doing great.
So essentially, I asked my service missionary leaders if I could do it, and they approved it. We were both hesitant at first because it's a new thing, and they approved it. And they sent it to my mission president and said, hey, can this be a thing? We'd call it Rapping Missionary or whatever, a Rapping Missionary. It's gone through different name phases. Rapping Missionary. And they're like, yeah, it sounds good. The only holdup was because technically it earns money. It was a little cautionary, but all that money goes to charity. So anything I make, it goes. I'm not getting anything. It's not. I'm just doing it to share the gospel.
Is that what you wanted to do?
Yeah.
Knowing that it would have a revenue, you were like, hey, I want this to go to...
Yeah. And like as a missionary, you can't make money. And that's not why you go on a mission,
right,
to make money and to support your career or whatever, right?
Right.
Like you go to serve. And so with that out of the way, it was go. And when I started, it was like, oh my gosh. And I felt like I found a reason why service missionaries were a thing, or at least for me, like why I felt like I was being impactful. I felt like I was doing something that's unique. And during this process of me accepting it, it wasn't just accepting it, but because there was so much stigma around it, I realized like, so for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there's a book of scripture called Doctrine and Covenants, and a lot of members of that church refer to a chapter in there where it talks about missionary work and how it's time to go out and spread the gospel. And to me, I always use that as an example to people. It doesn't say to go out by knocking on doors and teaching lessons and whatnot, whatever, right? Or it doesn't say to do that with serving in your community, or not that, but working at the humanitarian center or a food bank or whatever. It says, it just lists Christ-like attributes and says, go serve and go preach the gospel. So doctrinally sound, service, proselyting, they're on par, right? It's doctrinally sound, both of them. And the only difference is that cultural. And as I was starting this Rapping Missionary process, then it started to get bigger and bigger. And it was amazing. I was like, oh my gosh, God is magnifying this unbelievably. And it continues to this day, right? It just spirals on top of each other and spirals. And I don't know, do you have any questions? Because I could go into more. But
I just want to, I, as a consumer of your content, right? Mm-hmm. So I knew you. I go, oh, this is my former seminary student. Mm-hmm. And then I see what you're doing. Honestly, at first it like caught me off guard. I was like, this is really different. I've never seen anything like this before. And I had assumed there were some health conditions or something, especially on the ones where you could see the oxygen. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that side of the story. And so where it kind of caught me off guard, in many ways I was like, oh, I sure hope they protect Elder Castleton from the trolls of social media. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like I was like, oh, are people going to see this and make fun of him? Are they going to mock him in many ways? And then you saw the growth. I started to see, holy cow, like this is being received by people and they're receiving it quite well. I mean, I could receive it well because I knew you and I loved you and I cared about you and I wanted you to be successful. But to the general public, I was worried about the reception of that. What has that been like for you to see the reception of that content?
Well, it's really remarkable, right? Especially as a missionary. Service, you also see companions or just two elders or sisters that proselyte, right? Service missionaries don't have a companion. It's just me, right?
Yeah, you could just drive here. You didn't have to have a companion with you.
And there's a lot of different sets of things proselyting that aren't their service, but it's still the general basis, right? So yeah, the reception was interesting because there definitely were people like that, whatever, who didn't like it. But that's where all this mental health stuff kicks in and all this boundary setting, right? Or limit setting on social media and commenting and whatever, right? There'll always be someone who doesn't like what you're doing, right? And that's okay. Like that's fine. It's not for everyone to like. Right. I just put it out because I want to serve God, right? Yeah. That's how I can. But I've learned to balance my time on social media in a way where I used to spend all my time on that. And I know I'm going off a little direction, where I used to spend all my time on it. And it was really hard mentally. And you just spiral down on social media, right? You get more on it. Then you kind of distance yourself from the outside world and it leads to all sorts of problems. And I think once I had to step back and my family and friends are like, hey, let's kind of come out here in the world, right? But for me, I was like, but this is my mission. This is that. But even though it looks like I'm on social media all the time now, I'm only on it 3 to 4 times a week for less than an hour per day, right? Like I had my day yesterday, I was on it for an hour and none today, and then I'll have it for tomorrow for an hour and then none. And I just check it and I just post, respond to comments, done. Or see what's out there, whatever. So the reception part's interesting because a lot of people do enjoy it. And a lot of people It's just interesting, as I've never thought it's just so unique.
It is so unique.
Like I hope my main goal through it is that people feel connected with the music and that they feel good about it. But I've seen a lot of parts where a lot of people say, hey, like, I'm going to be serving a mission and I'm not going to be able to do proselyting. And I felt like not a missionary, but you're showing me that it is a mission, that I can be impactful. Or like, hey, I have a son or daughter who has a similar condition. She's 5. And we didn't know this is what it could look like. Or it's just so great to see you doing what you're doing, and it gives us hope for the future.
That's amazing.
And it has all these things where people connect with it in that way. So it's not only the music that's cool or powerful or impactful, but it's like just the example of being, like, I'll have some, quote, popular high school kids come up to me and want to take a picture. But it's unique because these popular high school kids who care about their image, right? Like and that's fine, whatever, right? They're coming up to a person with oxygen and a service missionary, and they're taking a picture, and they think it's cool. And it changes their minds of what service missionaries are, or just like missions in general, that you can do great work on missions. But it's just,
That's amazing to me because, we've had a lot of conversations about the culture and the stigma and how service missionaries get a bad rap in so many ways, pun intended, bad rap. Sorry, a little seminary teacher humor there, but so we've been really concerned about that. And here I hear your story, and you are single-handedly smashing that stigma by you being confident in the work that you're doing and it being well received. You have families and people who know that maybe a service mission is in their future, and they're seeing that it can be a variety of things where you can serve your fellow man and serve your God. That's really fascinating.
And I think one of the unique things it shows, especially service missionaries, are just people out there who want to make a difference. There's not one set way, right? A lot of service missionaries will come up to me and be like, hey, I wanted to do this as my mission. I didn't think I could, but I just asked and they said yes. So thank you, or whatever it is, right? There's this unique path that doesn't have to be the set thing. There are rules and things we want to live by because that's what makes us happy, right? I think just going back into the way I limit social media, I used to have a thinking error of I got to spend all my time on it to do the best or something, or I had to put all my effort in so much that I'm not setting these limits or boundaries. And then it was negatively impacting the way I was thinking, or it wasn't a lot of times where I back off but still post and things. That's when it does greater, better. Yeah.
So by small and simple things, great things are brought to pass, right? So you, by recognizing needing healthy boundary in how much you're using that social media, the Lord is able to use a concentrated amount for a greater good rather than feeling like you completely lose your identity in it.
Yeah. And I think when I was growing up too, I looked at people who were more well-known and I was like, oh my gosh, if I could just be like that, I'll be set. I'll be happy. But like even today, I didn't get I study the scriptures. I try to daily. I didn't get as great as steady as I wanted to this morning. And that's where I find happiness in this too. But if I don't have that steady in the morning, like I don't feel as good. Or like that's when I have my special time with God, right? Like that's where I can connect just me and him. And that's when I've learned to be okay with alone time because it's just God time, right? And I've just learned that that's so important to me but these things bring me joy too, like writing music and seeing how it's impactful and just connecting with people I love. Because I just want to show with all this that there is like hope. Like you don't have to just walk through life doing what everybody else does. You can still be a good person and pave your own way. Right? Like this is something that's never really been done too much to an extent, but there's a lot of things that haven't been done that I've been pioneered more too. But it's just interesting to see how, like I'm not a perfect person at all, and I have all these weak things like my health and my just insecurities or whatever that are coming forth and saying, this is a reason why. Because boom, now you can impact way more with this heart condition than you ever could without it. And
you know what's amazing to me about you, Elder, is that it's like because of your limitations, someone might think, well, I've got these limitations, so I got to stay within these limits. And what you've been able to do, your resilience has been innovation. Like, and oftentimes when we're in a culture of orthodox, right? Like, this is the way it's always been. This is our system. Don't rock the boat kind of a thing. Then we assume that everything has to happen within those assumed parameters in many ways, because we're assuming, like you assumed, maybe I won't be able to do these things. And then as you approached your leaders and said, can I do this? And they were like, yeah, go for it. I mean, we've got to recognize that within us is this ability to innovate. And as we present these ideas of innovation, because if we do what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always got, right? Well, it's not like the adversary's not innovating his ways. So why can't we, in efforts of good and trying to help people and in trying to smash these stigmas, innovate new ways to do that? Because as we do that, and if we believe in ourselves and believe the gifts that God has given us, he'll provide that increase just like he so clearly has done for you. Any thoughts on that? Does that make sense, what I was saying?
Yeah, I think for me what's been interesting too, as I approach conversations, because the stigma's there or whatever, if I approach situations like, I'm going to prove that this stigma's wrong, it doesn't usually work out the way I like it. But what I've shown is way more powerful as just an example, right? I think the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has service missionaries to just serve, right? And live as an example. And that's one of the most powerful things, right? Anybody can do. Like if you're figuring out how to help somewhere that, because your words will matter at a certain point, right? But what I love about this is I can live by example. And then when I speak, it means so much more because people see the way I live, right? And that's, a lot of people may not change their minds now. But hopefully 20, 30 years, whatever, 5 years, it'll shift. But I really do think like when you live in as an example and just be a good person, then your words and your service are going to mean so much more.
Yeah.
Because they see that, oh, you actually live it. You don't just talk about it and never do it.
That's what I love about this podcast is that people come on here and they share their story, right? And if you have trolls or naysayers out there, what are they going to do? I mean, how in the world can you challenge someone's story? It's their story. It's as authentic as it's going to get. No one can tell Elder Castleton what his story is. Only Elder Logan Castleton can tell his story. And so that's really how we help people to discover who we are and what this means is by sharing our story. And that's exactly what you're discovering. It's amazing you're discovering that in the way that you're doing it.
Thank you. I think too, adapting to change is so huge because if I didn't want to adapt, right, then I've had to learn to be very adaptive with my condition, right? There was one time we were going in for just a normal doctor's visit and then said, oh my gosh, you're going to need open chest surgery the next day, whatever, right? And then that happened. Or just things like you're going to go proselyting, service. Or you're going to do rapping, whatever is going to be the future. Maybe next month they'll say, new heart time, you're going to be out for a year. I don't know, right? And it's just so being willing to adapt. It's going to help you grow, right? Like we have these experiences, yes, to help others too, but now I'm going to come back to it. It really does help us. I don't think it's the hardship that changes us really, because people can go through hardships and come out the same and just be like, that was an awful experience. I never want to do that again. People will come out and be, whether faith-based or not, maybe they'll be, like if you're not faith-based, let's say like, I don't know, you go through something in the hospital and then you see someone else in the hospital and you're like, I just want to say hi and just make them feel okay that there's someone there too. Or maybe you're faith-based. It's the same, looks the same, right? Or it really is God and turning things good really. And God is good. That really changes you.
I love that. It's a human experience that we can take these challenges that we've had and we can leverage them for good to help other people. I think you've done that so well. I just had a surgery myself. And so I kind of understand, when you're down, there's a part of me that just wants to kind of wallow in my sadness, or my limitations and just be like, woe is me. Everybody look at me. Woe is me. Are you going to come and comfort me? Are you going to do these things for me? But it's like you've taken a hold of your life and you've capitalized on that rather than Because you easily could have just said, well, a mission's not for me. I've got this heart condition.
Mm-hmm.
Or if proselyting's not an option for me, then I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you haven't done that. That's pretty amazing. Do you realize how amazing that is?
And I hope that's what a lot of people, because imagine if we all did that, right? I'm just like one person, like imagine if we all did that in our respective, I like to talk about spheres of influence, right? My sphere of influence right now is a lot bigger than some's, and it's a lot smaller than some's too. But I think when we acknowledge our sphere of influence and not look on ourselves too much, like there's a time where, and we know this from the podcast and Post Wellness, just like you need to help yourself, be healthy, right?
Yeah.
I set limits all the time and things. But also, if you just focus on yourself, you're going to miss out on an opportunity to say hi to someone. Like I remember I just had a series of tests like last week, and just during a CT scan, I just talked with someone about the gospel, like just mid-procedure or whatever it is, just our spheres of influence. We have friends, like if you're in high school or at work or something, and you only have like 3 people to talk to, like you can impact their lives. And let's realize that, because there's so much good we can do if life's going to be hard. And not just missions. Everybody says mission's hard. It is, but life is hard, right? It's not just missions. But I love my mission because it's where I want to be right now with God, right? I could have said no, but could you imagine if I didn't even have the courage to say, well, I feel like the courage was given to me to say, Rapping Missionary, yes or no? Like, if I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't be here or whatever. So thanks for bringing that up.
It's great. So strange because it doesn't seem like I'm talking to a 20-year-old. It's an amazing education that your challenges have given you. It's really inspiring.
Thank you.
So, as you mentioned, as we invest in our own health to take care of ourselves, it's not for the end of so that we can just be healthy. Mm-hmm. As we become more healthy and as we implement healthy practices in our lives, we now have the opportunity to bless and serve other people. Mm-hmm. How has that been your outlook through this?
That's what's, I think we talk about how do I cope with it too. Like that really is how I cope. Like I want to not just be able to say that to help others, but I want to serve others. Like I think that's one of the reasons why we're here, right? Like going through this stuff, like to connect and serve with other people too. I don't know. There's just there's so much good we can do. And I don't like missing out on opportunities. I do it all the time because I'm not perfect, but I just strive. That's what gets me through hard times too, right? I just want to help others, but really when you're focusing on outwards, it really lifts you up to become happier. So it's like the cycle. That's amazing. And I believe it's sent here from God, right? Like this amazing system. And I don't know, like that's all I can say. We just have so much good to do. Like there's no time to, and I think I've learned that like, I don't know where my timeline is. So I'm trying to do as much as I can with the healthy boundary, just go into each day, like trying to think, okay, what can I do today in my sphere of influence? Like what can I do today? Because tomorrow I don't know where I'm going to be. So I got to make today count. Yeah. And my future is blurry, but I think everybody's is. Someone said it's more like predictable future for you. I was like, that's true. It's more like I could see my hard times a little more than some people, right? Because sometimes things just happen and you get in a car accident or someone's hospitalized or something, whatever it is like that you can't see. But for me, I kind of see a little how my trials are going to lay out, but it doesn't matter. We still live the same way, right? There's nothing we can do about it.
Wow.
So
yeah, that's refreshing to hear, to live a life like that, even though that future is so uncertain. Yours is literally day by day uncertain, and and yet you still suck the marrow out of life. I think that's a Dead Poets Society quote, to just get the marrow out of life. As you have had this opportunity to have a level of reach that's unprecedented in many ways, and I know that the numbers aren't important to you because that's not why you're doing this, but what are we talking about here? Like what platforms are you on and how far has it been able to reach?
Yeah, so if you want to find it, you can look up on Spotify, Rapping Missionary. So I put all my songs out, Apple Music, Amazon, Spotify, as well as I run social media accounts at Rapping Missionary, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. All those platforms are approved currently by my missionary leaders, service missionary leaders. And the reach has been amazing. It's gotten about, so I guess when you're talking about reach, like from a social media standpoint, like 3 to 4 million people have seen one of my videos on social media, and 14 million views in total of all social media. And that's just the people who see on social media, right? That's not people, hey, did you see this person? Did you see how this? And it's been 6 months and I have a year left. So I'm so excited.
That's amazing.
And it's just so amazing. Like,
I don't know if our listeners understand what a miracle that is, because
it is.
Here we are, we have our own podcast and we have a team of people. We're trying to get outreach. We're trying to get it out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
So to hear that you've been able to do that in the 6 months that you've had that opportunity is just amazing.
It's God's algorithm.
It really is. Yeah. It's a great way to say that.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
God's algorithm.
And I love, I think it is interesting to see that reach, because what I hope to come from it is things like this, where I get to speak more, right?
Yeah.
Like I have that example, but then I love speaking as well. And I just love connecting, right? Like, I don't know. Yeah, it's been amazing.
That's what we hope this will do.
Mm-hmm.
We hope people will see Rapping Missionary and they'll go, now what is that all about? I mean, I see the song, I see the talent, I see what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
What's his story? And they'll be able to find it here. So we're so grateful you're willing to come on here and share this story with us.
Well, thank you so much. This has been awesome. So
you're great. If you could say one last thing, like if you think of a listener that you hope is listening, what is that message that you hope that they take away from you and your experience?
So the first song I put out with Rapping Missionary is called Notice, and it was a personal song that I wrote about how God speaks to me in little things. And if that's what I could say, just look for those things in your day, just how God is reaching out, because he really is. That's what helped me get through high school. And now, like, these little things that, I love that song that's playing right here at this restaurant, or this person said hi to me and they never say hi to me, or whatever it is, or that, I don't know, sandwich was given, whatever it is. Like, these little things, God's reaching out, right? We only have to notice them, because he really does reach out to us and he really does loves us. So I'll leave it with that. Notice.
I love that. Can you give our listeners, like you say, your outlook is uncertain. It's you don't know what's next, but what do you see? What is next for you?
Well, just doing this for the next year, and then I'll go to college, hopefully start a family, and that's really I'm just so grateful to God, who will take all these things for good, right? I don't know what it's going to be like in a year, but I know I'm going to be looking back and being like, that was better than I could have done. Because that's really all it is.
Wow.
So,
what a great example, Elder Castleton.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, for sharing of your faith and your light, telling us what you're going through. And you are smashing stigmas. I hope you know that. As someone who's been trying to do that, you're taking a big sledgehammer to them, and we appreciate that. Thank you for that example.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.